Parent with purpose, disciple with direction, and leave an intentional legacy. This is The Informed Parent, a Think Media podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode. We are jumping in right where we left off with part 2 of the interview with Jenna Parker, a 25-year-old young business professional from Atlanta who transitioned and has now detransitioned. She is sharing her story and so much insight. As a parent, and as just anyone listening, grandparents, we're going to gain insight on what happens when we affirm things in our children that have no basis in reality. She has incredible insight. I had no idea that this whole world of transitioning and detransitioning was built so much on the occult. There's so much to this. It's so complex. And Jenna is going to help us understand even more from a parent's perspective how to prevent some of these issues. So buckle up. This one is a doozy, but I know you're going to be informed. So let's talk about just the topics. We've been talking about your story, but I really want to get into what is it that parents need to know, almost preventative. You know, what made you susceptible? And we've talked a little bit about it, that just being shy and maybe, hearing some words that you didn't understand. But from a preventative standpoint, were you exposed to things besides just the word gay? Were you exposed to things that you would say, this was dangerous, or this helped open doors to this process? Can you talk to me a little bit about that, just so parents understand maybe where they could be putting up some guardrails or pulling information out of their kids a little bit better?
Yes, if you are a parent and your child has access to the internet, you have to be really smart. Um, they can hide things really easily on the internet. There are private browsers. You can erase history, but I'm sure you can install something as a parent with privacy locks where people can't do that. And I would advocate for that. I saw things I wasn't supposed to way, way too young. I was watching all of the L Word like when I was 13. Um, I was watching YouTube videos about like sexual things with two girls and like informative stuff for adults, like things that were just not for me at all. Um, and it messes with you, you know. I was on like chat rooms and stuff. It was really bad. Talking to who knows who I was talking to. And yeah,
Were the chat rooms something that, you sought out specifically, or were you on a game? Were you on an app? Were there certain things where all of a sudden you landed in a chat room? Because
mm,
there are predators. I mean, that we know
yeah.
that every app has an access that, people are jumping on to talk to children. So was it something that you were seeking out because of what you've seen, or were there things popping up and you're like, that's interesting, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole a little bit, or some of both, maybe, I don't know.
I wasn't actually seeking out the chat rooms. I was on apps. Like there was one I think called like Whisper, and you could post secrets anonymously, but then you could also message people through that. And then, oh gosh, I was reading like fan fictions too. And those are obviously, I don't know how much you know, but those are inappropriate. So yes, be very conscious about what your kids are looking at online.
At what point did you have access to a screen that you, like, how old were you, and then how old were you when it was sort of left that you could watch it wherever? And was it a computer or phone, both?
I was in elementary school when I had an iTouch. So it did have internet when I was on Wi Fi. It wasn't an actual phone, but it had games and it had internet. And then I got a laptop when I was 13. That
And
was
all
not
that.
supervised.
Okay, not unsupervised from the get-go.
Yep.
Okay, and then you talked a little bit in terms of, affirmation with family or friends, but also talk a little bit more about the affirmation that you were getting maybe on social media, and how, if you were on social media and you were sharing all of this, were there individuals that you were getting to know through social media? Was it just the number of likes? Like, what did the high come from?
I think it was as a shy kid being seen and like being cheered on.
Mm.
And it was even people like my parents' friends being like, you're so brave. And, you know, you're going to do amazing things, stuff like that. That felt like I was being given a purpose throughout all of this, and people wanted to interview me and like stuff like that.
And that was all in response to the gender ideology. You're
Right.
so brave and you're going to do amazing things because you're
Yeah.
okay. Wow. Okay. It's a lot, Jenna. This is quite the process, but here's the great thing. Good night. You have had such a major transformation in the way that you see the world and the way that you see yourself, and this is a lot of trauma. And so talk to me a little bit about how you're detransitioning. I know your prayer is that more people would. I mean, I know that you're praying that people would, come back to themselves, I'm sure. But as you're processing the trauma that you've gone through based on your choices, how does that work? How are you processing that?
Yeah, that is my main prayer, honestly. When I pray when people detransition, I pray that it's going to be easy and that they have the strength to do it through God, because I got through it solely because of God. Um, and I worry about everybody who's so deep into it, but I'm here to tell you that nobody is too far gone.
Hmm.
And my detransition process was completely built on faith. And essentially, I was in bad relationship and it ended, and I looked at my life and I was like, where am I? What am I doing? So that was my point where I stopped smoking weed, which was essential to gain some mental clarity. I went into kind of an isolation period. At the time, I was living in Atlanta with these two people I didn't know very well at all, and it was not a great area to be living in. And just to paint a picture of the environment. So I was in my room a lot, and I remember just like my body and brain reconnecting again. So that took a long time. That was before I even started questioning detransition for real. But it was in the just very take a step back, like laying in my bed, seeing my water bottle next to my bed, and being like, okay, brain, touch it, pick it up, bring it to my lips, drink some. It was literally like that. So I was gone and I was rebuilding back myself.
You are literally
And
coming back into reality.
yeah, literally. Um, at that point, I did start to get rid of all of my occult stuff. I put all of my crystals in a river, and I did give some to somebody else, which I regret to this day and wish I never did. But I was just slowly re-entering reality, as you said so perfectly. And I was watching YouTube videos, and I started listening to Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist, and he's very well known for basically counteracting the compelled speech that people were trying to throw on him with pronouns, because there's a difference between
Right.
banning words, like you can't say this, and compelling speech saying you have to say this, because that's not our free world. That
Right.
is very scary, considering politics and what that could mean. So I actually started listening to him because, interestingly, his main subject group of viewers is men, lonely men who feel lost. And that is who I believed myself to be at the time.
Wow.
So within transitioning as well, I learned a lot. So I came from this place of not having respect for men, even though I became one, in quotes. And I remember walking in the shoes of, being perceived as a man, and I couldn't, say hi to people with babies anymore and be like, oh, so cute, because that was creepy. And I couldn't make eye contact with women anymore because that was creepy. And I had to go to the other side of the street, and I had to like take on more like weight, like literally like physical weight, like at work. And I just gained the utmost respect for men, and I have the utmost respect for men now. And I had these deeper conversations with men in that time too, that just completely opened my eyes, and that was so essential. So I was listening to Jordan Peterson because I was like, I miss friendship, and I'm lonely, and I started listening to his older lectures. He was a professor at University of Toronto and University or NYU. He was a professor, and he had this one lecture about good and evil. And growing up, we weren't, super religious, but my mom always said, if you're a good person, you're a good person. And I'm like, what's a good person?
Right.
Um, so this podcast, or it was the lecture, answered that question for me. And he basically said, a good person, you can call yourself a good person in a naive way where you're going about life and you're a good person because you don't know any better. You're just a good person. But a true good person is someone that knows the depths of their own ability to do evil and still chooses good. So that to me was like, that's me. I've done evil. That's everyone. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Everybody, has the potential of being good and evil. No one's born one way, the other, whatever. So I started to get into this kind of faith-based mindset of, okay, now nobody's perfect. We're all very flawed, and I can choose to do good. That's my will. So I want to. So I was listening to him a lot, and that was really encouraging. And then I started working at a retirement home in a really nice part of Atlanta as a bartender. And yes, everybody like questions that, like a bartender in a
I was like,
retirement home,
yeah,
but
that you don't hear that sentence every day of the week. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of wine, a lot of old fashions and Cosmos, and it was really fun because I got to hang out with all these people who had all this wisdom,
Hmm.
and they only knew me as Ben. That was my name that I legally changed it to. So they only knew me as Ben. They saw me as that guy, just like this little guy, and I was just talking with all of them and getting to know them all. And all of them were only truly happy living in this beautiful place when family came to visit. And
Mm.
that's one thing I really picked up on. And then one day I was working a Mother's Day brunch. So it's grandmothers and their daughters and all of the grandchildren. And I just went to the men's room, shut myself in the stall, and cried. And everything hit me that I'd been pushing away because there were countless moments where I knew I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, but I still pushed on. That was part of that new age.
Mhm.
I am the author of my own story. I need to do this even though it doesn't feel right. I'm not going to listen to that tiny voice that I hear. But I knew in my heart what was really right. And then it all hit me and I was crying and I just told myself, I'm playing God. I'm playing God.
Wow.
That's what is meant for me. And I'm taking away from it. And I was just so repentant. And my older sister had her first baby that year. And I was like scrolling on Instagram and she posted about how motherhood was her purpose. And that just like wrecked me.
Mm.
And I knew that night that I had to detransition. There was no more pushing that away. So I was feeling that, I knew the truth, but the pride in me and all the praise and everything that I let get to my head, that was literally my house of cards that I was like relying on. And then I was like, that doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. At the end of the day, I was still lost. I was still depressed. I was still just worse than I was. There were moments where I looked in the mirror at 3 a.m. and saw nothing behind my eyes and I knew I wasn't okay. Like, so yeah, I at this point, everything that I experienced, everything within working at the crystal store and being involved in the spiritual realm from the dark side, and everything I experienced was kind of coming to, you know, make sense and me
Into the
accepting it and
light.
surrendering. Yeah, literally. So I did tell my mom and my sister that night because it was Mother's Day. So I went over to my parents' house that night, and it was just my mom and my sister, and I, finishing up a movie on the couch, and I just told them that I think I made a mistake, and my twin sister took that really, really hard, and I just feel horrible. We're better now. We still have a lot to work through, I think,
Yeah.
just how things affected her, and I want to be there for her as best as I can, and we've, talked about that, and we're healing our relationship, which is just the biggest blessing because she is my heartbeat. And my mom, she just kind of was like, take it slow, because she wants to keep the peace between both of us, and but I knew what I had to do, so I got off of hormones and I'm still working at my job for like a couple weeks, and I'm about to go into my shift, and I'm kind of in the restroom there, like breathing, about to go into this environment where everybody knows me as Ben, but I know the truth, and just knowing what I have to do, but not knowing how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And I download on my phone the Bible app out of nowhere. And I've never read the Bible in my life. I'm Jewish. I, you know, can read Hebrew, but I don't know what it means. And I start reading the Bible, don't even know where I was reading it. And not not a minute into reading it, and I get my period for the first time in 3 years. And my body
Which is pretty
was,
miraculous, right?
yes, incredibly, incredibly miraculous. And I've been, my body's been regular since that day. So at that moment, I just knew that it was Jesus. And I was just like, okay, um, thank you. Like, okay, what do I do now? So I was shocked coming from the perspective that I
Yeah.
was. Um, so I just quit my job. I moved out of my bad living situation back into my parents' house, grew out my hair, um, and did a software engineering boot camp. I had already graduated from college, but I wasn't using my degree, and I just wanted something to keep me on track. So for 40 hours a week for 3 months, I was doing the software engineering boot camp, and I had like a mentor at the end who helped me get a job, and I started working, and I changed my name legally, back to that. But in the midst of all this, I'm processing everything, and I'm praying, and I'm reading the Bible, and I am basically just waves of grief and crying and emotions. And God will only show you what you are ready to process when you're ready to. People process trauma like that all the time. You black things out
Right.
and then they come back up when you're
Absolutely. Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
And yes, so my double mastectomy, waves of grief for like a good bit. And um, thankfully, finding community more recently has alleviated a lot of that, pain for me,
Right.
because it would be for a long time, that that would be my thought before my head hit the pillow at night. I would just be like in grief
And
and
grief. Yeah.
regret, and yeah. So spent a lot of time praying, spent a lot of time listening to podcasts, crying when I got a job to and from work, just crying, just like processing everything. Literally, it was almost like watching a movie, because I was
Yeah.
like going backwards. It was
I'm
like things
sure.
that had happened, yeah, more recently, and then things that happened less recently after that, and going through all of it and like taking lessons away from it and understanding how I really felt during those times and what was healthy and what was not. And yeah, it was all that processing was hard, but it was healthy. And like I mentioned, I only got through it because of God.
Yeah. So just a couple in closing, two quick questions. I'm so curious. How do you define identity right now, or view identity at this point? Like, where do you find your identity?
So, it's funny too, because I was the same person throughout all of this.
Yeah.
I changed how I looked, I changed my name and everything, but I was still me the whole time. And yes, like being in a new identity, originally helped me get out of my shell, helped me kind of like break free from who I was before. And that just meant being more extroverted and feeling more comfortable going up to people and not being as shy and putting myself out there more, trying new things without, fear of making a fool out of myself.
Yeah.
But I still had all of that after detransition. Like those are gifts from God. So it's not about, identity is not about your aesthetic preferences. And in today's day and age, that is what kids identify their identity around. And it's going backwards. It's very regressive, because, back in the day, sure, when gender roles were very, very strict, if you're a boy, you like blue. If you're a girl, you like pink. We've gone back to that with this, I don't know, name tag stuck on it of progressive. But really, you're you're saying if you like blue, yeah, you have to be a boy. If you're pink, or whatever it might be.
Right.
You can like whatever you want. That's not your identity. So yeah.
Awesome. And then lastly, Just such a story. But I'm curious what you would say to someone who has transitioned, or to a family member who has someone who's transitioned and they're considering detransitioning, or they're just not sure. They think, "Oh my gosh, I've completely blown it." What would, in sort of your last words, what would you say to someone who's really struggling and in the same shoes you found yourself in?
That's a really good question. I would say that something I think would have been helpful for me to have is somebody to help me walk through the logic of my decisions without judgment, without thinking for me, just next to me when my brain wasn't working, to kind of be the brain and get my cogs rolling. Of when I drew a conclusion, them to ask me like, how did you get there? Or what does that mean? Or just breaking it down, do it very gently, because I, for one, was super sensitive. I would have just screamed at somebody who, like, or felt myself higher than somebody who looked at me a way that I didn't want to. Exactly. And hurt people. So at the end of the day, it was such a cry for help, but nobody is going to want to help you if you're pushing them away. So at the end of the day, I did have to, and everybody has to accept personal responsibility. But for a child, it's much harder who doesn't have that, wherewithal just yet. And mind you, I was legally an adult. All this started when I was around 20. So, yeah, you should be gentle with who is going through this. Take it really slow with them. I don't know if I have like a singular answer, but I will just say, I guess, that you are just at the very beginning. All of those things, if you are questioning detransition, look into it more with yourself. There's not that many resources out there, unfortunately, at this time that are helpful. I would say to be wary of online spaces, because there's a lot of people with just ideologies that are every which way, and it's really best to just be with yourself, God, and those who you trust, and think out loud. Don't hold it in.
Awesome. Well, Jenna, it's such a journey, and it's such a redemptive story, and just your walk with the Lord has been tremendous, and how you're just pursuing who He is and who you are in Him and learning. It's so encouraging. So thank you so much for sharing the journey and being so vulnerable, to help people sort of understand what's going on in the headspace and what's going on in the world, because it's both internal and external. And so being able to tie those two together and process it, it's really, really important. So I so appreciate it, and I have just loved getting to know you.
Oh, same here. Thank you so much, Suzanne. God bless you. I've loved this podcast.
Okay, parents, so that wraps up the second part of this incredible interview. I know that you're just probably as blown away as I was the first time I heard it. It's such a journey, but what a redemptive one. The fact that Jordan Peterson, listening to Jordan Peterson, started to point her towards truth, the fact that she bought the Bible app and just started reading it, and that Jesus has become the center of her life, and she's finding her identity in Him. Unbelievably redemptive. And I'm going to use her own words. She said in the first part of this interview, nobody is too far gone. She was dabbling in the occult. She had really no religious foundation. And yet, through all of this, she has found Jesus. She's on a path, and she really, really wants to help others understand the journey she was on from a preventative standpoint, and I admire her for that. So this particular part of the episode helps us understand, really from a preventative standpoint, what are some of the things we should be thinking about as parents. Not really just for gender ideology, but what's going on those screens, and what kind of controls do we have, and how much freedom are we giving our kids? And so I hope that this particular podcast is going to help you understand what's going on in this world that is so new to all of us, this gender ideology, but also help you engage with your kids in really meaningful ways. Hope this helps you parent with purpose, disciple with direction, and leave an intentional legacy. Parents, with all the chaotic thinking in our current culture, it's hard to know who or what to trust. But it shouldn't be this way. We're not meant to live with a spirit of fear. The Think Media platform is loaded with content that you can trust. Content from a biblical worldview, content like the Informed Parent Podcast that will help you develop your cultural discernment as a parent and create conversations with your kids that lead to wisdom. Wisdom is our goal. It's easy to access this content. Just go to thinkmedia.com and create a free Thought Leader account. Simply enter your email and password to get access to hundreds and hundreds of talks from experts in all channels of culture. Plus, get access to the Think Framework, Guide to Better Conversations, and the Create a Conversation digital tool. Remember, informed parents make informed decisions. Sign up for your free Thought Leader account at thinkmedia.com today.